Hello and welcome to 10 by 9, where 9 people have up to 10 minutes each to tell a true story from their own lives. I'm Paul Doran and this is the 10 by 9 podcast. And what a week it's been, with a truly brilliant 10 by 9 on Wednesday in our home venue, Belfast's Black Box. The theme was class, and we had wonderful stories, 4 first-timers, a full house yet again, and a 10 by 9 first.
But we had our own unique sense of pride in ourselves and in our school. And our own motto for the school was, "Hold your noses, here's St. Roses."
Dad, I know you got that right, but I don't know how you did it, and that's not who we're taught to in school. I nodded, and after a while said, "I know, son, but you got it wrong, and I got it right."
I had occasion to comment that the prof seemed overly pleased with himself that he was beating his 16-year-old in sums. So, well done, Dad.
I think I'm still buzzing from that night. It really was something very special. Now, I won't witter on too much because I really want to get stuck in and give you a flavour of the event. And if you haven't made it to the Black Box yet, why not? All the dates are on our website, 10by9.com. Anyway, on with the stories. And first up on this podcast is a first-timer. Here's Bernie McDonald.
I made my way through primary school in a bit of a haze. I wouldn't say I was slow, but I was definitely unhurried. I was soft, shy, easygoing, quietly plodding on without any ambition. I never had the desire to be the best at anything. That seemed to require an awful lot of effort. I wanted to be middle of the class, middle of the road. That was my comfort zone. But I was really lucky. I had 2 best friends that went to school with me every day. One was a beautiful black and tan German Shepherd dog called Ben. Ben was a very clever dog. He always stayed right by my side. And any time that I got nervous, all I had to do was lower my hand, touch the top of his head, and whisper, "Good dog, Ben, good dog," and everything would be okay. The reason why Ben was so well behaved and allowed to come to school with me was because he was my imaginary friend. Being invisible was very useful for both Ben and for me. It meant he could come into the classroom and sit under my desk. With him there, I was never frightened or lonely. At break time, Ben would come out into the schoolyard with me, and I would spend lunch throwing an imaginary ball for my imaginary dog. He so loved that ball. Oh my goodness. If any of the older girls, P3 or P4, wanted to give me any hassle, Ben would growl softly and bare his teeth. This always did the trick. "Good dog, Ben, good dog." My other best friend was my duffel coat. I would run from the classroom on the bell and hug my duffel coat on the peg, hug it tightly. In the 60s, everyone wore a duffel coat. Duffel coats came in 2 colours, slate grey or mousy brown. But my duffel coat was a glorious shade of blue. It had fabulous toggles, really, really shiny ones. And even better still, my duffel coat was lined with bright red material. There had never been such a coat. You can forget Joseph and his Technicolor dream coat, or any coat Dolly Parton might have sang about. There was only ever one blue duffel coat, and it was mine. Of course, the main reason why my duffel coat was so special was my mum made it for me. My blue duffel kept me safe and toasty warm. It was just like a big hug from Mum. At the end of the day, I would dander happily home, wearing my blue duffel with my trusty pup at my side. As I moved up through primary school, a few things were inevitably left behind. Firstly, my shy nervousness, which was no bad thing. Secondly, my fabulous blue duffel, as I outgrew it. Sob. And thirdly, Ben, my Ben. One day he just wasn't there. This hurt a lot, but I remember thinking he'd gone to be with somebody who needed him more than I did. So I made my way through the rest of primary school relatively unscathed, and I even managed to make a few real-life friends on the journey. So now it was on to big school. I went to St. Rose's Secondary. We were very much second-class citizens compared to the shiny, maroon-clad pupils of the grammar school next door. But we had our own unique sense of pride in ourselves and in our school. And our own motto for the school was, "Hold your noses, here's St. Rose's." So you can see we didn't take ourselves too seriously. Something miraculous happened to me, though, in that school when I was in year 10. And year 10 is third year in old money for anybody of my age. I suddenly discovered that I liked history. I could do history. I had a light bulb moment. Coming from a working class family meant that my future was already planned out for me. I was to leave school at 16, get a job, and help support this family. But thankfully for me, fate stepped in. My older brother got an apprenticeship, and his wage meant that I could stay on at school. I did my A-levels and then went on to university. After uni, it only took 12 years for me to spot that second light bulb. But this was a big one. I wanted to teach. I knew I wanted a boys' secondary school in West Belfast. That's a little glimmer of ambition at that stage. I knew absolutely I didn't want to teach girls. I mean, I was one. I knew what kind of shits we were. Boys are simple and they don't hold grudges. So I started work in my first school, my first and only school, CBS on the Glen Road. A typical class was a bunch of unruly 15-year-olds, and that's the polite way to describe them. These lads had zero interest in school and even less interest in history. My opening salvo was always the same. Right, lads, take a seat and get your books out. This was countered with, "Are you for real, miss?" Or, more serious or more ardently, "Are you serious or what?" One lad in the class, though, stood out as different. He was built like a rugby player. He was tall and strong, but he was quiet with it. I wouldn't say he was slow, but he was definitely unhurried. He was soft and easygoing and plodding along quietly without ambition. I'm going to call this boy Michael because that was his name. Michael was a pleaser. His mantra was, "Show me the answer, miss. You just point at the answer and I'll write it out. Doesn't matter how long it is, miss. I'll write it out." Michael was 15 and he couldn't read. Michael was the first boy who broke my heart. One group that I loved working with were the year 8s, the babies of the primary school. They piled in September, fresh-faced and bright-eyed, in uniforms 2 sizes too big for them. "My mommy says I'll grow into it, miss." 11-year-olds haven't had the stuffing knocked out of them yet. They're full of promise, energy, and raw enthusiasm. And bless them, they even loved history. History to them was a rollicking good yarn, full of blood and guts and gore, goodies and baddies fighting it out. They lapped it up. They would even leave the classroom asking, "But what happened next, miss?" And I'd say, "You'll have to wait till tomorrow, lads." Believe me, EastEnders had nothing on Miss McDonald's history class. One day, marking homework, red pen in hand, with the school's very rigid marking policy in front of me, quickly SP fix splattered blood-like on the page. And I soon realised that red would outdo blue. So I stopped. The book belonged to a young man called Keelan. I wrote a comment on his work and returned it to him. I could see him sitting at the back of the room frowning at the page. So after a while, he made his way back up. "Excuse me, miss, What does that say? It says, excellent effort, Keelan. He stands there looking confused. Then he looks me in the eye and says, I've never got excellent for anything in my life. How on God's earth can that happen? So Keelan was the second boy who broke my heart. I spent 24 years in CBS and I had my heart broken many, many times. But on the upside, the boys kept me on my toes. I learnt a lot, I laughed even more, and I got to work with boys who are the best of the West. I got to see them grow into young men to be proud of, and on a good day, I knew I played a part in that. So what of young Michael? Well, Michael got a job as a security guard in a really large shopping centre in West Belfast. Perfect job for him. He always says hello anytime I'm in, and he's now happily married with 3 kids of his own. My heart no longer breaks for him. It bristles with pride. And what about me? Well, look, I'm all grown up now. I'm an adult, acting my age and not my shoe size. Although, to be honest, there are times. There are times when I am not sure of myself at all. Sometimes I feel that anxious child hovering close. But I'm working on it. In fact, we're working on it. Aren't we, Ben? Good dog, Ben. Good dog.
What a gorgeous story, Bernie. You really drew a few tears as well as the laughs from the audience. And I think that's probably our first imaginary dog friend to come along. Thank you so much. If you're wondering what the process is for telling your story at 10 by 9, just like Bernie, well, it's simple. Check out the themes and dates on the website and submit your story through the submissions page. I'll give you feedback and help you make it the best it can be. It doesn't matter if it's just a vague idea or a fully formed epic. Get in touch. Or you can email directly at 10by9belfast@gmail.com. Feel free to email me about anything. I love hearing from you. Okay, here's our next story. In fact, it's 2 stories, so I'm going to let you hear how it played out on the night. First up is Stephen Magee.
The inaugural Magee family math classes started in August 2012. First student, my son Ben. He had approached me one evening and told me he was struggling in class and hadn't been selected for additional maths. Now, back in the days of leaded petrol, single cigarettes and unrest in West Belfast, odd maths were strictly for swats and hence was to be avoided for fear of unwanted attention by the less studious pupils who roamed the playground or exercise yard, to give it the prison parlance it deserved back then, looking for wounded lambs. Now, though, in touchy-feely Rathmore, the reverse was true. And in fact, things were so bad that apparently parental intervention was needed. Change days, but what's a man to do? So the next night, we set up at the dining table where Ben spread out his homework. I read and reread the algebra problem before me. And after a fair bit of head scratching, I'd blown the cobwebs off, and having checked I'd got the answer right, set about showing Ben where he'd gone wrong. He listened, and then, looking puzzled, said, "Dad, I know you got that right, but I don't know how you did it, and that's not how we're taught it in school." I nodded, and after a while said, "I know, son, but you got it wrong, and I got it right." There was a bit of terse back and forth, which culminated in Mike shrugging and saying, "Fine, keep getting them wrong," while Ben flounced upstairs to his room. My wife, Sharon, making the dinner opposite, arched an eyebrow and said, "How do you think that went, Prof?" Defending myself, I explained I had no idea how the hell they were teaching the kids these days. All I know is I got it right and he got it wrong. Well, she countered, if the aim was to prove you're better at maths than our 16-year-old son, then well done, you did. Conscious it was date night coming up soon, I considered my options. Chatting to a friend the next day, he agreed with me about these new teaching methods and suggested you nearly need to go back to school to understand how the hell they were teaching maths these days. Recognising a good idea when I heard it, a week later I found myself in the enrolment hall of the Tech, signing up for a night class in GCSE maths at the age of 46. Now, for my sins, I'm a quantity surveyor by profession. To those of you not in the construction industry, we are cost consultants and sometimes referred to as brick counters. There's a fair bit of low-level day-to-day maths in my job. To not do well in the maths exam wouldn't be a great ad for us. Suffice to say, my business partner mused, if you don't do very, very well in this exam, we'll not put it on the website. So, in mid-September, I made my way to level 3 of the Millfield campus for my first 3-hour Monday night session. Incredibly, I found myself nervous. First day nerves and all that. Standing outside in the corridor, it dawned on me that my much, much, much younger classmates thought I was the teacher and were waiting on me to unlock the classroom door to let them in. It was the straightening up and stopping swearing, I remember it, gave it away. Assuring them I was in fact the teacher, I was delighted to see a few other oldies waiting awkwardly. It turns out they were from a local factory which was set to close, and they had found that GCSE maths is mandatory for interviews now. Also there to my surprise was a family friend who needed to pass GCSE maths to achieve her dream of becoming a midwife. The actual teacher, half my age, arrived and class began. Hands up, I thoroughly enjoyed that year. I found that not only was I able to get the skill set to help Ben, I also ended up in an Owl Ones study group, complete with occasional pints after a class in Madden's. Back though to Magee College. Under the proviso that learning can be fun and much debate discussed, I named our revision book Big Blue and developed a few props. Study aids, I believe, is the technical term. For example, to assist with surface geometry, I favoured the bean or soup can with the label removed to show the dimensional relationships. I found those little Trivial Pursuit counters serviceable fraction illustrators. Pride of place, they went to a shoebox which, with a bit of string fixed diagonally from top to bottom and coupled with a torch and some dramatic dim lighting, was such a good way of illustrating 3D trigonometry that I'm shocked it's not in general sale. How the hell else to explain it? Ben and I have a lot in common. A love of books and music, the same sense of humour, a dislike of contact sports. However, I just couldn't get him to appreciate the beauty of the objective finality and cleanliness of maths that I as an adult got out of it. I'm happy to report in the August of that year, not only did my actual classmates all pass, including Linda, who's gone on to deliver classrooms full of babies, but Ben excelled with an A star for me. Thanks for asking. Class was suspended until 2015 when my daughter Grace was next to benefit from my newfound teaching zeal. Grace was, it's fair to say, a different student than Ben. Looking back with him, it was a war of attrition, of which he was up to a challenge. Grace is now a first-class honours graduate in English from Queen's, but it's fair to say maths wasn't her strong suit. She found the maths hard, and the fact she found it hard even harder. Grace and I also have a lot in common. A love of books and music, same sense of humour, a dislike of contact sports. Never mind not getting the beauty of maths. Grace fucking hated maths. Full stop, from the ankles up. There were algebra tears nightly. I'd like to say that I had the skill set to adapt my teaching style to deal with this. I'd really like to. In fact, I'm going to say I did. Others may differ. I suspect they might. Grace struggled tearfully through my enthusiastic math classes, and I'm extremely proud of her getting a B that year. There you are, Grace. She has, to my knowledge, never willingly considered algebra, trigonometry, or geometry from that day onwards, and certainly not surge. Last up was Sarah. I had to patiently wait 2 years for her to be sent to fetch Big Blue. Again, she was a totally different student. Sarah and I also have a lot in common. A love of books and music, same sense of humour, a dislike of contact sports. Here's the thing though, Sarah may deny it, but I think deep down she actually got the beauty of the maths, finally. She sat patiently and stoically through each by now well-rehearsed homework and past paper session, all the while silently fancying that she was actually a bit better at maths than me. When we got different answers, she would sit back in the chair, arms folded, arch her eyebrow like her mum, and smile while I scratched my head and wondered aloud if the answer book was maybe wrong and had coincidentally got the same wrong answer as hers. Why else would I be the wrong one out, odd one out? There was only ever the one crack between us when one night she preemptively grasped my wrist and said quietly but firmly, "Please, Dad, not the beans can. Think of Mum." Sarah sailed her way to an A, and just like that, my short career as a maths teacher was over. I'll not lie to you, when I found myself at the end of the era, tossing out not only the past papers, but also the bean can labels and the infamous shoebox, there was a hitch in my heart. I kept Big Blue, though, just in case there'd be a wee late one. Looking back on it, I wouldn't change a thing. What looked the others a chore was a genuine, unmissable pleasure. All different the kids may have been, but one thing's for sure, they're all class.
Oh, Stephen, thank you so very much. Proactive parenting at its best. Now, for those of you who are regular, you know I'll often come up after a story and say, I would love to hear that version, that story told by someone else who was a witness to that. Well, for the first time ever, that's exactly what we have now. So please, a big warm welcome for her first time, Sharon Magee.
Before I start, it wasn't that funny when we rehearsed it at home. So you can all just wind your necks in a wee bit there. Okay. All right. You've met my husband, Stevie, the professor in residence. So this is what I saw when he decided he was going to be a part-time homeschool teacher. So rolling back, it's 2012. Our son Ben was sitting his GCSEs and he asked for help with his maths. Now, I don't recall him asking either of us specifically. It was more of a general cry for help. We were new to GCSEs, having come from the olden days, the era of O-levels, but I knew for sure that things had changed significantly since our time, so I graciously stood aside and let himself step up. This was partly a vote of confidence, but mainly a let's see how this experiment kind of works out sort of thing. And I also had a notion that Stevie assumed that that cry for help was directed at him, not us. I didn't know them, but wasn't at all surprised as things panned out that it would become an odyssey of sorts. My dining table would become a classroom, complete with study aids. More on that later. My eldest child would regret opening his mouth, and my husband would himself go back to school, night school, maths, GCSE, complete with all his new mates, and you've heard his excitement around that. So, when the kids were small, over the course of a few years, I had escaped to Wednesday evening classes at the Tech, and I knew the joy to be had from a few hours at a potter's wheel or wielding a soldering iron and developing photographs. It was a bit of fun for me. I was not surprised in the slightest, though, when it became something else for the prof. When the help he was given was taken very seriously and actually became rather competitive. So classes took place religiously on set days at set times, and that was fine. It was good, even because Ben learned right away there was no negotiating in any of this. And I learned right away that dinner didn't take precedence anymore. That was a thing of the past. So Ben's motivations at that time could be summed up as 1, don't get kicked out of school, and 2, do enough to get back to the subjects that he loved so he could drop all the other stuff. And all the other stuff specifically included maths. And I totally got what he was aiming for there. Now, the prof's methods were a combination of fatherly love, a willingness to help, and a few handmade study aids. A favourite maths revision book that was named Big Blue on account of it being big and having a blue cover. And an absolute determination that this was going to be a positive experience for them both. They were bloody well going to enjoy this, or else. My role was periphery. I provided snacks, made comforting noises when things got fraught, which they did. At times, I was more of a peacekeeper than anything else. I occasionally made helpful suggestions when the lads were not communicating in a productive manner. In my mind, they were helpful suggestions. Stevie suggested perhaps not. But I had occasion to comment that the prof seemed overly pleased with himself that he was beating his 16-year-old in sums. So, well done, Dad. And he took that as a compliment, so cool. My food cupboard was raided for tins with removable labels, to flatten them out to show how to work out the area of a cylinder. Unable to identify contents then, I frequently opened bins when I needed soup or vice versa. And I can tell you, fish fingers, chips and soup was not what anyone asked for, ever. The board games were raided for dice and for Trivial Pursuits pieces. I was asked for a shoebox and some wool. And what? But the prof had a plan. So my one good pair of heels was thrown in a heap at the bottom of the wardrobe so he could build this 3D trigonometry study aid. And with the help of a torch, he could demonstrate angles. You had to be there. I don't know. Anyway, that study aid was his pride and joy, as you've heard. And it was put away afterwards for future use. So I knew even before our poor Grace did that she would be invited to admire this demonstration of how easy and, at his insistence, how beautiful it all is. It was only a matter of time for her. When Ben and the prof's GCSE results landed, I was thrilled for both of them. Success all round, all targets achieved. He was thrilled with himself. To be fair, it was quite an achievement. Balancing night classes with work and classroom sessions in between daily life, it was a bit of a juggle. So there was cause for celebration, and off he went with his new mates for a pint of Madden's. I took the kids to Raffos. In 2015, Grace very deliberately did not ask for help. She was getting it. Grace's motivations for studying were very different from Ben's. She was emotionally motivated. She loved her school. She loved her teachers. She hated disappointing anyone. Her physics GCSE teacher was retiring that year, and he had let the class know it would be a feather in his retirement cap if the whole class could get an A. Imagine. Can I? Old fella, that one. So that was enough to set her on a study plan to be sure she wouldn't let Mr. Collins down. There was no way he was going to be disappointed on her watch. Her Irish teacher was her favourite of them all, and she was determined to do well by him too. So buoyed along by his earlier success, the prof started the homeschooling in maths again. And I noticed he didn't mention this one, but he also enrolled himself in physics GCSE. Yeah. He also enrolled himself and Grace in Irish conversation classes in Culturland, where the average age of the pupils was 65. So Grace was immediately adopted by the older ladies as something of a mascot. Now, this was not what she had in mind, and it was all she could do to very gently let her dad know that her plans for studying Irish didn't involve sharing Parma ballots with septuagenarians every Wednesday. I joked I would soon need to go shopping for a school uniform for the prof at this rate. And here I was again, trying to figure out what was in the tins with no labels. And I pleaded for someone just to use a marker, just to identify the food when they stripped the tins, but no dice. Dinner time was once again a thing of mystery. Unfortunately, the prof was overambitious. He'd flown too close to the sun by overreaching. His actual life got in the way this time, and he started to miss classes, falling behind, and he even missed his own GCSE physics exam. Yeah. That was a tough one for him, and it still rankles. He doesn't talk about it much. Grace, however, romped home with that all-important day in physics, which she is still surprised at. Mr. Collins retired a happy chap, and our Irish teacher was proud as punch. And the maths tuition paid off in spades, and I know Grace would agree that the prof could take some credit for that one. Moving on to number 3, in our classroom, our Sarah, different motivations again. She hatched a plan to thrash her dad at maths. She was going to secure her position as the only one in our house who truly understood imaginary numbers, something called surds and our old friend 3D trigonometry. So I watched their study sessions from behind the cooker with a wry smile as Sarah regularly corrected the prof's homework, which he took in good form. Mostly he was amused because he is a good sport, and I knew he secretly enjoyed these classroom sessions. Building memories, he called it. But he was also just a little bit peeved to be regularly pulled up by Sarah, given this was his third rodeo. Sarah politely asked her dad not to go get the study aids. She said she got it. She didn't need the shoebox with the string. But he was not to be dissuaded. Out they came, same level of excitement, and I was sent to find batteries for that torch. It was only when all was done and dusted that summer that they were relegated to the bin with a small sigh. Unfortunately, the Trivial Pursuit pieces went too, so we never played it again. It was class. I enjoyed watching the whole thing, and it didn't end there. Last summer, I overheard my niece Polly say she was struggling with algebra. It was like someone had sent up the bat signal. Out came Big Blue. He was at it again. He couldn't help himself. Thank you.
Oh, wow. We've had couples tell stories before at 10 by 9, but more in a tag team style. Never quite like that. And how the audience loved it. Brilliant. Thanks so much, Stephen and Sharon. Please come back with more. And that is it for this podcast. You can keep up with all our upcoming events and themes by having a look at our website. That is 10by9.com. 10 by 9 is on the socials, of course. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and or Instagram. If you want to help support us, you can donate at Patreon. Thanks to everyone who has, as well as those who support us at the live events. Thanks to everyone who makes 10 by 9 happen. The wonderful Leanne, Margaret, Chris, and Cara. The lovely team at the Black Box, the best venue in Belfast by far. Our 10 by 9 audience, of course, they really made this evening very special, and it's always nice to get a full house. And of course, thanks to all our storytellers. But the biggest thanks this week goes to Bernie McDonald, Stephen Magee, and Sharon Magee. I'm Paul Doran. I'll be back with another podcast soon. But for now, bye-bye.